I hit the post. Tell Tucker how to hit the post. It's a radio thing.
Han-IT. I'm calling you Han-IT from now on.
Han-IT because I call you Ingraham?
Right.
It doesn't work. It's not funny when you try to do it back. You got to think of something new, creative, and original.
Wait a second. You're talking to me about the need to come up with new jokes? Are you kidding me? You've been making that joke since 1997. Okay.
You are out of your mind.
Since 1997, you've been making that joke. Okay, so I don't think you.
Are you going to get in trouble every week on the air? Do you have to get in trouble every week? Oh, by the way, look at my tie. Could it be any more crooked than it is now?
Yeah, exactly. Well, only a man that's really filled with virility and testosterone can pull that one off, Hannity. But you got it.
I straightened it out on air while I'm talking?
That salmon color is looking really good. This is fascinating. As fascinating as this is, I got to get to my show.
All right, have a great show. We have a little talk to come soon this week. I'll tell you about it later.
Okay, fantastic. All right, Hannity, thanks so much. Great show. Good evening. I'm Laura Ingraham. This is the Ingraham Angle. We have a lot to cover tonight, a lot of ground to cover, and we'll get through it together because disgruntled former employees are throwing in with the anti-Trump lynch mob. But how effective are their media tantrums? The updates on axed FBI agent Peter Strzok and ousted White House aide Omarosa are coming up. Plus, Antifa went nuts yesterday, fantasizing about, well, just murdering the president. We'll tell you about the left's stunning silence on the issue in just a moment. And a new poll about the Democrats' views on socialism. It should disturb the party and, frankly, all Americans. But first, who's really dividing America? That's the focus of tonight's angle. Last week, the media hyped yesterday's Unite the Right 2 march, a white supremacist gathering in Washington.
A large gathering of white supremacists in the nation's capital who will march for the same abhorrent reason that they marched on that day a year ago.
Come Sunday, white nationalists and bigots like the ones you're seeing on your screen from a year ago are expected to once again take to the streets, this time in front of the White House.
As the White House pushes back on her allegations that the president is a racist, thousands of white nationals are preparing to demonstrate just outside the White House this weekend.
Did he say thousands? Well, despite all that, the supremacists managed to turn out a whopping 20 protesters. They were far outnumbered by the members of the press, whose news organizations undoubtedly spent gobs of dough giving them free airtime to the pathetic, largely irrelevant band of racially obsessed malcontents. So have the media ever given this much pregame publicity to a march that actually turns out, hundreds of thousands of protesters? Most of them young. They often show up in bitter cold or freezing rain. Like the annual March for Life? I don't think so. But that annual event is positive and life-affirming and respectful and attended, as I said, by mostly high school, college kids, and it does not advance the left's agenda. But the weekend's white supremacist circus had possibilities. The president rightly tweeted before the much ballyhooed supremacist march in Washington the following. He said the riots in Charlottesville a year ago resulted in senseless death and division. We must come together as a nation. He wrote that he condemned all types of racism and acts of violence, and he said peace to all Americans. Well, since Trump rode down that shiny escalator to announce his candidacy, journalists have worked overtime to paint him as an avowed racist. Well, every view he has, for instance, on law enforcement, standing for the national anthem, the travel ban, and of course on immigration, they all allege it's racially motivated. It can't possibly be that the president advances policies and ideas because he believes it's going to be good for Americans, good for safety, good for the American worker. No. Well, you add the tragic events of Charlottesville a year ago, and you had the media's backdrop going into this weekend's Unite the Right freak show. Those sad 20 figures were swamped by over 1,000 counter-protesters, and some did carry signs that simply read kindness or love, and that was heartening. But the real fireworks happened when these folks showed up. was basically a family affair. Well, Black Lives Matter and the domestic terrorists posing as protesters, aka Antifa, were present and revealing the ugly underbelly of what could have been a powerful statement against true hate. Instead, here's how CNN, though, classified all the non-white supremacists as, quote, anti-hate groups. I don't know about you, but just like we all know what the vile hatred of racists sounds like, we should all know what it sounds like when directed at a racially diverse police force who are standing there either in the heat or in the rain just trying to do their job on Sunday.
Who the you protect? Who the you serve? We are your all of y'all that are protecting the that want us dead.
They wanted to get at where the 20 racial obsessed malcontents were. Well, apparently protesters like to tear each other limb from limb and want the police to get out of the way. And if you happen to be driving a vehicle in the vicinity yesterday, this is Black Lives Matter's way of spreading love and peace. Now, if these guys have nothing to hide and they're on the side of right, anyone ask them why they're wearing masks? To conceal their identity from law enforcement? You know why? Because they destroy property, they harass officers, throw projectiles at them, and they just attack the innocent. Now, this next video, this couple's crime, well, wearing Trump t-shirts.
From 2020 and has to walk around with security and escorts because they're saying he's a Nazi.
Still, the media coddle Antifa and these leftist protesters, largely because their anti-Trump message aligns with the one prevailing in a lot of American newsrooms. But if they're going to cover for them rather than cover them, will the media now align themselves with this message too? At least they're rhyming. Not that you'll see or hear many of those images on other media, of course not. Even when these lunatics, by the way, turn on journalists, attacking reporters in the street, cutting their cords to their cameras as they did this weekend, the media they want to look the other way.
Don't be shoving on people. What's wrong with you? Yeah, and get that out of my face.
Yo, let go.
I got it. Come here. Okay. I'm this size. Hi guys, I'm this size.
Clever. Well, this was posted by an NBC reporter on his Twitter account. It shows his camera crew assaulted by these nut jobs.
You snitch. You. What's up? Don't worry about that now. Don't worry about me. Don't worry about them.
Yet later, when NBC went to coverage of the event with the same reporter, they omitted the fact that their own crew had been assaulted, and they showed no video of the incident. How curious. Imagine if some conservative group oriented had done that to a reporter, what they would have said. They get upset when the Trump crowd screams, Acosta, go home. Well, the media are actively concealing the heinous actions of these fringe groups because they serve their ends. No matter the tactic, no matter the violence or mayhem, these groups are largely given a pass because they are brazenly, vociferously, consistently, vitriolically resisting Trump. How ironic, by the way, is it that just days ago, the Boston Globe convinced more than 100 news organizations to blast the president for his verbal and written attacks on the media? It's not collusion or anything. Well, they're set to release coordinated editorials in newspapers across the country later this week. Yet when a group or groups actively attack them, the press, physically destroying their equipment, they scream vile things and threaten reporters. The media silence is deafening. It's Fox News who's supporting the protection of journalists. I suppose the old saying is true. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, no matter how awful and violent that friend may be. But if they continue to turn a blind eye to the hateful actions of groups like Antifa while exaggerating the importance of a handful of goofy racists craving attention, the question must be, who's really fomenting division in America? The guy whose policies brought black and Hispanic unemployment to record lows? Who fights to keep MS-13 out of already stressed areas? I don't think so. I think America is a lot smarter than the media think they are. And I think they see what real hate is and who's trying to solve rather than stoke problems. And that's the angle. Joining me now with reaction is National Review columnist and Hoover Institution senior fellow Victor Davis Hanson, Juan Williams, co-host of FNC's The Five, and Fox News contributor Tammy Bruce. All right, guys, quick reaction to the angle. Juan.
Well, I just think the heart and soul of what happened in terms of the coverage, Laura, is that last year in Charlottesville, we saw the Unite the Right people come together and express not only hatred, intimidating folks, but kill somebody. And as a result, when you have the Unite the Right now come back for a year later rally in Washington, D.C., and you see protesters turn out in greater numbers, nonetheless, the press is going to pay attention to people who are there, who organize to spread their hatred. And in fact, as you point out, in some cases, it's not appropriate behavior by the anti-fascist crowd and the Black Lives Matter crowd, but that's nowhere as big a story as what's going on in terms of that far fringe neo-Nazi KKK group being empowered or emboldened to stand in public in front of the American White House and say that they believe that in racial supremacy. I think it's contrary to our values as Americans.
Well, of course, the ACLU, Tammy, has supported Nazis marching in Skokie. Racists have been protected. We have a First Amendment. The most vile speech must be protected under our Constitution. That's why we have a Constitution. If it's just positive speech protected, then what does it all mean?
Yeah, we wouldn't need it.
But nevertheless, it is such a small group of people. Mm-hmm. They have no influence in American society. They have no relevance, and they are, by everyone who matters, the overwhelming majority of the American people, reviled.
Yeah, look.
At the same time, you have 1,000 people in Washington, and some were fine. I think some of what happened was fine. But there was a very strong element that expressed deeply disturbing sentiments and physically were very aggressive. And I don't think there was much focus on that at all.
Well, look, there's actually two other stories here. The real story is that there were only 20 white racists at this event. That is remarkable. Obviously, somebody unlocked their parents' basement doors to let them out. Any average American could get more people at their backyard barbecue with 2 hours' notice. And this was with, of course, 24/7 coverage by the legacy media pumping up this weekend event. So that's the story, is that in this nation of hundreds of millions of people, 24 people show up who are the white nationalists. The other part of that story is that this Antifa, people perhaps have forgotten. In early of 2016, a report from Politico later in that year noted that through interviews and secret documents that they found that Barack Obama's Department of Homeland Security designated Antifa as enacting domestic terrorism violence. Now, that is significant as the federal government during Obama's term was warning state and local officials that this was very dangerous, coordinated behavior that they needed to really deal with seriously. And now we fast forward, Laura, to your angle, where you've got the American media, and particularly CNN, calling it an anti-hate group, a group that Barack Obama's administration determined to be enacting a domestic terrorism violence. So there's a disconnection here, and I believe that the connection, in fact, is to force this false narrative of racial division in this country that is not as it is portrayed to be, that we are not as divided as they say, and that needing this kind of division and hyping it as being major is what they require to move their narrative.
Well, Victor Davis Hanson, so many angles to get into this with you, but I felt bad for the police because they're standing there, and we're going to get into this more with Furman and Bongino, but they're standing there. This is their job. They're just trying to keep the peace between two groups, one small and one very large, and try to keep the peace. You saw the video. We didn't play all the videos. We're going to play some in a few moments.
Yeah. I think the larger narrative is, though, that we've reached a point in American society where the media really does believe that the noble aim of truth or justice or fairness requires almost any means necessary. And it's not just my view. I mean, the Shorenstein Center at Harvard said 80 to 90% of the press coverage was biased. We know that political donations go one way from another study. When you look at journalists in the past during the Obama administration, the WikiLeaks Podesta trove, even the recent hiring of Sarah Jeong at the New York Times, despite a racist paper trail or Twitter trail, you get this image, and it's not, again, it's not mine, it's not yours. People who were very eloquent on the liberal media side have said, Jorge Ramos, the editor of New York Times, Jim Rutenberg at the New York Times, I think even Christiane Amanpour, that Trump poses such a threat that the old traditional journalistic ethos should no longer require.
Yeah, by any means necessary. By any means necessary, Victor. I mean, this is Jim Rutenberg, Tom Friedman, Jorge Ramos said we're in a different scenario.
Yes.
And I know, Juan, you've said some of this too. I mean, you said, you finish up and then we'll get to Juan.
Yeah, just one really quick point then. What Trump hasn't done, this is rhetoric, he's fought back at the media what he calls fake news, but he has not jailed two reporters like JFK did. He did not survey the Associated Press reporters like in the way that Obama did with James Rosen at Fox News. He didn't introduce a bill like the Roosevelt allies in Congress did, called the libel bill, to stifle opposition. He didn't do what Hillary Clinton did in 2008 when she tried to stop that Hillary documentary. So, and the final tragedy is what's not being reported. We have the fourth highest member of the DOJ, Bruce Orr, who was colluding with Fusion GPS after the election to undermine a president. And we've got, my gosh, we just had Dianne Feinstein admit that for 20 years her chauffeur was a spy for the Chinese government, and she's one of the ranking members on the Senate Intelligence Committee and the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Her husband has extensive business in China, and it's not news.
No, it's a blip.
And so people don't trust the media anymore, and that's an empirical fact.
And they're hurting themselves, Juan. This is my point.
Yeah, they are.
Be aggressive, hold the president accountable. That's what they should do. I agree. But be fair. If you're going to cover hate, then cover everything about what happens. Don't cherry pick a line or a scene, or cover it and be fair about it. And what is happening with this Antifa group, whether shutting down speech on college campuses, Tammy's aware of it, so is Victor, he's at a college on the West Coast. It's outrageous that people's free speech rights are being intimidated, and they're trying to shut down people with threats of violence or actual violence. And we're treating them like they're just ambling about having a protest. No, they're not. No borders, no walls, no USA at all. Really? What the heck does that mean?
Well, Laura, it seems to me you're off target here in a big way. I mean, to me, the big threat, and you see this all through the opinion polls in America, people worried that Trump is emboldening racist behavior, words, and action in our country. We had a year ago Charlottesville, and we saw the kind of tiki torch madness that was not only anti-black and Latino, but we saw them intimidating people in synagogues. You see what's going on in terms of the Trump rallies, the hatred towards the media, the press being called the enemy of the American people. And instead you're saying, oh, but look at all these protesters and look at some of these wacky people who are attracted to protest in America, any protest. But
well,
that's
Juan,
not the story,
Juan,
Laura.
if you're worried about the media telling Jim Acosta, go home, or CNN stinks or sucks, I said on this show that I don't like that.
Well,
I didn't like it when it was done at the rally. I didn't like it. But when journalists are physically attacked, Juan, and they don't report it on their own network, something funny going on.
No,
maybe
Laura,
I'm not the smartest person.
I think you would be the first. Look, I know you pretty well. You would be the first to say, oh, look at these self-centered reporters. All they want to do is report and talk about themselves and the fact that somebody bumped into them or pushed their camera. They don't want to talk about the news of the day, which is that you have racists on the streets of Washington as they did and behaved in Charlottesville.
We got to go, guys. Hard break. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. The ridiculous white supremacist rally in D.C. over the weekend thankfully turned out to be a total dud. But what about those so-called counter-protesters?
We are asking people what they would do if President Trump were to show up at this march. Some of the answers have been pretty stunning.
If it came down to it and it was a group effort, we'd have to do him like Gaddafi.
Like Gaddafi?
Yeah.
Murder him? Murder him for the people?
And as you saw on the Angle, it's not just the president they're threatening. Antifa members shouted slurs and got physical with the D.C. police. Joining me now for reaction to get an idea of how law enforcement is reacting to all this chaos is former NYPD and Secret Service officer Dan Bongino and former LAPD detective Mark Furman. It's great to see both of you. Mark, you might have heard what Juan just said. And look, we don't want any white supremacists out there. You don't want 20, you don't want 2,000, you don't want 200. But they do have a First Amendment right, and they are going to go out there, just like the Nazis can march and the KKK can march. It's not pleasant to see, but it's the reality. But the point that so many are making is that that's 20, and they're contained, and they're irrelevant, and they're hateful, but then you have a lot of other stuff going on that's not really getting adequately aired. Mark.
Well, of course it isn't, because it doesn't address their narrative. But when you look at these, I can't remember a legal protest for years, and I mean years, 5, 6, 7 years. The left breaks the law the moment they have a protest, and I think this is a failure by everybody to address that this is a First Amendment right. The First Amendment has nothing to do with depriving other people of their rights, violating laws, attacking people, assaulting people, and vandalizing property, and assaulting and challenging officers.
Oh, Mark, is it even allowed to go? I didn't realize you could go like a millimeter away from a police officer's face and shout horrible, vile things. And basically spittle is going in the police officer's face. Some of them have shields. But I didn't even know you could do that. I thought you couldn't do anything like that. But is that, they just didn't want to push back because they didn't want any violence?
Well, I don't believe you can do that. Once you make any kind of contact, bodily fluids, any kind of contact, challenge the officer to fight, any of these things. But you have to understand, Laura, this is inciting a riot. Now, I think this is a complete failure of leadership. These poor officers, the rank and file, are put up there like some kind of wall, a symbolic wall that they're doing their job, and all they have to do is just stand there and take it. Don't make contact. Don't rock the boat. Just stand there. We'll do our jobs, and these poor officers have to take this abuse. This is not the way it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
Once they commit a crime, they should actually target that person. They should open up. They should actually move forward, arrest that person, and keep moving.
Dan, I'm sure the thought is, they do that, and then it's all hell breaks loose, and then you have utter chaos. The left gets what it wants. See the police brutality. I feel like they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. I think they did an amazing job over the weekend, that there was as little violence, frankly, as there was. But how do the police feel in this situation? How did the Secret Service feel? You heard those kids threatening the president's life. I mean, they weigh about 120 pounds by the looks of them, but they are threatening the president's life.
They are. And Laura, listen, I've been there. And let's just be clear, right? Let's just call it what it is. These are disgusting human filth bags. That's what these people are. Yeah, I know it's your show. You probably want to be a little more measured. I don't really care. I was a cop. These are friends of mine. These are dads. These are moms. These are people who go to work every day for a meager salary in a job where there's a strong likelihood, Laura, that they could be killed defending your life. They're not perfect. They're sinners like everyone else, but they commit to a higher purpose. In your job and my job, Laura, that doesn't happen. We don't go to work every night with the thought that there's a pretty good likelihood I could be injured or killed tonight. And what do they have to deal with? This disgusting human filth out there spitting in their faces. And I'm absolutely, listen, I just talking before the segment to someone, I'm saying I'm unbelievably salty tonight because I'm tired of this the entire day, the media coddling of who these people really are. Anti-hate groups? These are the very essence of hate groups. These are violent, confrontational, aggressive people who spit in the face and scream at and confront police officers doing absolutely nothing wrong. And ironically, they're to keep them safe as well. They are the worst among us, these people.
Yeah, that Brian Stetler over at CNN, he's a beaut. He says the banner on CNN, anti-hate groups dramatically outnumber white supremacists in D.C. That's his tweet. And then we have this MSNBC commentator defending Antifa, Mark Furman. I want you to watch.
There were some journalists who were attacked by street protesters. Those protesters were also going after the police. They didn't want to be on camera. They're believed to be part of Antifa. What's your take on this?
I didn't see it. I know one thing when I was in Charlottesville.
Well, there it is. We're seeing it.
Yeah. There were a lot of different activists who were like, why are you in riot gear? We don't see no riot here. There is a belief, I'm not saying it's always correct, but there is a belief by many activists, including Antifa, that the police tacitly support this kind of violence.
Well, where was the pushback on that? I'm not sure there was. So the police are supporting violence against what? The journalists, against the protest? You lose track of the narrative, guys, because it's so nonsensical, as if the police enjoy spending their Sunday nights dealing with this nightmare, whether it was last year or this year. Mark.
I'm going to tell you, Laura, and I'm going to tell you this, and Dan knows this too. The last thing you want to do is be sitting in all that heavy riot gear, waiting for a demonstration in the hot sun, waiting for them to actually do what you know they're going to do. They're going to violate the permit. They're going to violate the law. They're going to not disperse when they're told. They're not going to do what they're supposed to, what they already agreed to with the city officials. It happens time and time again. Then you have to stand there. Unfortunately, these officers don't get to do what we probably got to do. We had leaders that were actually there, and they understood that once a crime is committed, one thing is thrown, game starts. That person will be pursued. The crowd will be dispersed. Tear gas will be actually ignited and sent into the crowd, and everybody will be split up. It's their choice. They don't want a peaceful riot. They don't want a peaceful demonstration. That's the way it is.
Dan, final thoughts.
The worst case scenario for a cop when I was with the NYPD was getting that mobilization card where you got mobilized to go down to a riot, Laura. Those comments you just heard about them wanting this passive violence or violence are some of the most disgusting comments I've ever seen in broadcasting. They should be ashamed, and that person should never be allowed on television again.
No,
those are disgraceful.
Guys, we need to do a whole hour just on the law enforcement aspect of all of this. Thank you so much for your input tonight. Next, Sean Spicer versus the Omarosa saga. Don't miss it. Coming up. Talk about unhinged. Fired Trump aide Omarosa Manigault Newman is making all sorts of outrageous, incendiary claims about the president, of course, promoting her new book. She even released a secret recording or two of her conversation with the president just after she was fired. Well, she better have a good lawyer. The president fired back at wacky Omarosa this morning, calling her vicious, but not that smart. So vicious is okay if you are smart. Joining me now for reaction are Chris Hahn, radio host, former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer, and with me here in the studio, former White House press secretary Sean Spicer, author of the bestseller, The Briefing. Sean, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Chris, good to see you. All right, got to start with you because you reminded me the last time you were on, right? Or one of the first times you were on.
Right after the show launched.
Yeah, I asked you, what does Omarosa do? What's her job?
And I said, I don't know.
And that got a lot of publicity. You just told me that, by the way. Speaking of the controversy, I should say at first, Mark Burnett apparently called the president. That's what the president's tweeting tonight, to say that there are no tapes of The Apprentice where I use such a terrible and disgusting word as attributed by wacky and deranged Omarosa. So she's gone from wacky Omarosa to wacky and deranged Omarosa. I don't have that word in my vocabulary, never have. She made it up. Look at her many recent quotes saying such wonderful and powerful things about me, a true champion of civil rights, until she got fired. Omarosa had zero credibility with the media. They didn't want interviews when she worked in the White House. Now that she says bad about me, they will talk to her. Fake news. Spicer.
Agreed. I mean, look, she continues to make stuff up. She made some serious accusations about me and some other folks that have left the White House the other day that are completely false and inflammatory. I think part of this is the president's right. There's twofold. There's one is what she has done. The disloyalty.
Protesters, useful idiots, useful never-Trumpers, useful Omarosa, useful Michael Wolff. Most of them have been discredited for one reason or another, but they're useful for the by any means necessary remove Trump approach to things. That's where I see things coming down.
Well, they're also emblematic of the president brought them into the White House, including Michael Wolff, who he gave a lot of access to.
Oh, I agree with that.
He brought Omarosa to the White House.
Totally agree with that.
He gave her a job. Their security protocols were so lax, she could record things in the White House, including in the Situation Room. She's saying things about her colleagues. Look, Sean, I mean, you're saying you don't have a non-disclosure agreement, but do you have any agreement with the president? Because you were treated pretty poorly, and you've been very nice to him, I think, since you left the White House. So I mean, there's a lot of dysfunction in the White House, and Omarosa is just pointing that out. And we're going to hear more and more tapes, I think, in the days and weeks to come.
Is there any dysfunction in any of in Omarosa herself? I mean, you know what I'm saying? There's dysfunction in the White House. Okay, but the media, let's say that's true. Let's take that as a given. There's dysfunction. There was lots of dysfunction in most White Houses, frankly, whether you heard about it or not. Yeah. In this case, you can at least say, well, we know who a person without credibility sounds like and acts like.
Laura, the only reason we know Omarosa's name is because of Donald Trump. So everything Omarosa is and everything she will be is because of Donald Trump. He created Omarosa.
Well, I agree.
He created a monster.
I agree with you on that. And Spicer, you got to get in on this.
But
why was she brought into the White House?
Here's the deal. You're right. She had been loyal and a cheerleader.
What was her experience in the executive branch? Why are you defending
I'm not. No. What I'm saying.
She said nice things. That's what you did, Sean.
I know people who are loyalists for Trump.
I agree. Look,
who literally volunteered for top positions. I'm not trying to get on you. It's not your decision. But literally interviewed for top positions, which are qualified. And they wouldn't even get a hearing by the White House personnel office.
All I'll say this.
Still won't get a hearing.
And I don't
Drives
disagree
me
with
nuts.
the fact. However, I will say this. She had been a loyal person to the president. During the campaign, she'd been a huge cheerleader of his candidacy, of his values, of the results that he was going to get. I understand the president turns and says to somebody who'd been loyal, I would love to have you come with me on the team.
She worked for Obama and the White House fellow.
Look, I'm not here to defend her, but I'm saying that the president rewarded her loyalty, and in return,
what was her experience?
I will agree with Chris on this.
Experience.
I agree with you,
Sean.
Hold on, Chris. Let me agree with you for a second.
It's experience.
I agree.
We got other things
I agree that she didn't have the experience necessary to come in. But the bottom line is that this is the kind of payback. She is who she is because of Donald Trump, and the only thing that he's gotten in return is disloyalty from her.
No, well, that's a given. I mean, I agree with you on all of that. I'm just saying, don't bring in people to the White House who have literally zero experience for that position. Whatever her position was, I guess she had some position that I'm not sure. She said this on Hardball tonight. We're almost out of time. We got to watch this.
Omarosa, if you have any other recordings, you wouldn't share them here. Do you got some?
Oh, I have plenty.
Anything Mueller would like to see? Robert Mueller?
If his office calls again,
would you be a good witness in this investigation by Mueller?
Absolutely. Anything that they want, I will certainly.
Do you think Trump should be impeached?
At this point, yes.
She's a legal expert as well, real quick.
I just think the disloyalty and the breach of security are beyond the pale.
Legal problems?
I hope so.
Well,
I don't know what she is signing up, but I hope so.
There has to be a reason so many people are taping conversations with the president and the people around him, Sean. You have to admit to that.
Chris,
there is some suspicion
one person does
about
not make
him
so many
and
people,
about
Chris.
how he relates things. Well,
One person-
I'm wondering if this is not the only. This is not the only tape. This is not the only breach of security. I mean, Stuttering John got through to Air Force One a couple of weeks ago. There are real issues with the way this White House is run.
What was the name of the wacky couple that got into the White House and actually walked into the White House during the party? From Middleburg, Virginia.
Or whatever.
Oh, so don't give me this garbage, Chris, that the White House was all locked down during Obama. They waltzed in, could have done God knows what to Obama and Michelle. Come on.
It was a state
I love having you on, but that we're going to call you on. But Chris and I agreed on something
but
tonight.
look, it is happening.
All right, guys, great
it is
segment.
happening now, right?
Yeah, a great segment. Thank you so much. And the anti-Trump texting FBI agent Peter Strzok finally got the pink slip. And that may be some very bad news for Hillary Clinton. Wow, we'll tell you why. You're fired. That's the message the FBI gave Peter Strzok on Friday. The anti-Trump texting agent was at the center of both the Hillary Clinton and Russia investigations. Mr. Strzok has now joined Twitter, where he posted a statement from his lawyer claiming his firing was due to, quote, political pressure. He also provided a link to a GoFundMe page where he's already raised, oh wait, it's gone up from 80,000. It's already raised $139,704 of $150,000 goal. Do you think he might get that? That was in 11 hours. Joining me now for a reaction, former federal prosecutor, Fox News contributor Andy McCarthy, and retired FBI special agent Bobby Chacon, who knows the man at the FBI who had Strzok fired. Great to see both of you. Let's start with you, Bobby. FBI Deputy Director David Bowditch is being hit and trashed by people saying, well, he must be doing this under political pressure from Trump. But let's look at his resume for a moment. Let's put it up on the screen. He began his career as a police officer. He's a former FBI SWAT team member and sniper. Already love him. Oversaw non-white collar crime investigations at FBI San Diego office. Ran the LA field office, led the FBI response to San Bernardino, and of course now he's the deputy director of the FBI. And tell us a little bit more.
Well, as my 27 years in the FBI, he was probably one of the best bosses I ever had. You know, I worked for Jim Kallstrom in New York during those years, and Bowditch, Dave Bowditch ranks right up there with that. I mean, you won't find somebody with more integrity than Dave, and I always thought, I worked directly for him here in LA, and he spoke at my retirement, and I always thought if there was somebody that could steer the Bureau through this morass that we're in now, it's Dave. And he did the right thing here. OPR recommended a suspension. Dave saw that, we need to have a change for better or worse. We need to get rid of these people that were in those positions and did these things. And I think he did this for the betterment of the FBI. I think it was pure and simple. Strzok needed to be punished for his actions, but I think overall he did this because overall as an institution, the institution has to be bigger than any of us individuals. And I think Bowditch saw that, and he made the decision that this is the best course of action for the FBI going forward.
Candace Will, Andy, was the person in charge of the Professional Responsibility Office at DOJ. She initially decided that Strzok should only get a 60-day suspension, which was some punishment. And her resume is the following. Deputy Chief of the DOJ General Litigation Criminal Division under Mueller. Assistant Counsel in the DOJ Office of Professional Responsibility, Assistant Director of Office of Professional Responsibility, again, appointed by Mueller. That's not, neither here nor there, but she was appointed twice by Mueller to very senior positions within the FBI. And so, again, some people are saying because of the way the investigation has gone, she was not going to throw the book at Peter Strzok. However, you made a point earlier about the IG, the Inspector General, didn't find the behavior that some of us probably thought he should have found on the part of Peter Strzok.
Yeah, Laura, the thing is, I don't agree with the Inspector General's assessment. What the Inspector General found was that while the texts were very troubling, that no particular decision could he conclude was driven by bias. Now, I didn't agree with that, but doesn't matter what I think. That's what he says, and the FBI, more importantly, embraced that decision. So my only point here is I agree with Bobby about the need to turn the page at the FBI, but I do think that this kind of stuff doesn't get decided on people's resumes. It gets decided on, here's the grounds on which we fired him, and here's the evidence backing it up. Remember when Andy McCabe got fired, they explicitly found 3 charges of lack of candor. They backed it up with a lot of evidence, and it turned out that, you know, the decision was consistent all the way through. Here, I'm not saying that this is indefensible, because I don't think there is. I think we could find 10 good reasons to fire this guy.
Yeah, the August 8th, 2016 text message to Lisa Page.
Right.
We said, we're not going to let that happen. She gets worried that Trump might be doing, well, we're not going to let that happen. Well, what does that mean? I mean, I know the Inspector General didn't, I mean, he didn't say, well, you can't show a decision he made. But, I mean, I don't see how that's in any way, when we're not going to let that happen. It wasn't saying I don't like Trump. That's one thing. We're not going to let that happen is a collective description of something the two of them could possibly do together in their positions.
Right.
That's the only way you can read that.
And I think his testimony on that in the congressional hearing was not credible.
No.
My only point is you have to articulate the reason why you're firing him, and if you don't, what they're going to say is that it was due to political pressure.
Yeah, they're arguing that Trump talked to Sessions, Sessions talked to Bowditch, and I mean, this is what his lawyers are arguing. We'll see how it all plays out. Guys, thanks so much tonight. And the Democrats' love affair with socialism growing. We're going to reveal the results of a shocking new poll that should concern Democrats everywhere. Next.